What's going on, YouTube? Cult of the Sun here. I'm a little tired, so excuse me if this video doesn't sound quite as good as some of the others. But the reason I'm making this video is because lately I've been getting a lot of questions about Shiva, and I hadn't worked much with Shiva at all in the past. I always had a little Shiva idol. Just kind of kept it on the shelf though. Never put it on the altar. Never really worked with it much. And before I was really working with Shiva much, I was kind of exploring the energies of the black sun. I was just trying to get that energy embedded in my subconscious, just constantly thinking about the black sun, always finding a way to think about the black sun so that void energy would go into my subconscious. Well, shortly after I'd been doing this, I start getting a lot of questions about Shiva. And, I didn't have the answers to all these questions because I hadn't worked much with Shiva. But I'd always known the meaning of what the word Shiva means. Shi means no, va means thing, Shiva, nothing. So, in essence, you could say it's dark matter. You could say it's the void. You could say it's that which is not. And when you first start working with Shiva, he's one of those entities that's kind of hard to pick up on, at least in a personified type of form. You start working with Shiva and, you're like, am I feeling anything? But you realize it's the energy of nothingness. And as you start to connect with it more and more, Shiva in more of a personified form starts to reveal himself. Well, this all kind of, seems to relate to, in my opinion personally, entities such as the Black Sun, entities such as Lucifer. I know there's going to be a lot of people who might be screaming, who are going to say, you got some people, like you got a lot of Hindus who get upset when you compare, Lucifer to Shiva or Shiva to an entity like the Black Sun. It's not an insult, because first of all, Lucifer's not an evil entity, and second of all, you also get the other types like I call them historical reductionists. The people who, look at, some of our Western pagan history, and they might say something like, oh, well, Lucifer, he was actually, only known as the Greco-Roman male god of Venus. Well, see, the thing is about the pagan history, our Western pagan history, is about 70% of it was destroyed by the Christians. They didn't want any of that information out there. They didn't want any of those traditions to be revived. So I'm all for looking at, our history and trying to figure out exactly how these entities fit in. But when I look at an entity like Lucifer, for example, there's so little we know about the cult that surrounded Lucifer. My personal gnosis, is that it was probably tied into like the sun cults, like, the cult of Sol Invictus, things like that, because it always announced the rising of the sun, and always, brought the night as well as the evening star, the morning and the evening star. Anyway, that's beside the point. So the name Lucifer. Let's look at that name for a second. Lucifer comes from the Latin lux ferro, light bearer. Well, let's think about this in a more cosmic type of way, because Shiva, since I've been working with Shiva, he's been teaching me to, helping me think in more of a cosmic type of way. He's a very cosmic entity. He represents all, the dark matter in the universe. It's about 70% of the universe, the cosmic void, if you will. And it's kind of changed my thought process a bit. But the name light bearer, well, what is it that bears the light? Really think about it. You've got a speck of light. What's around it? You've got darkness. You've got the void. The darkness is what encapsulates the light. So I tend to look at Lucifer from more of a esoteric perspective rather than a historical perspective because, considering how much of our history we've lost, we don't know the full story. We know very, very little. And to try to put together a full story based on, the fact that, we've only got 30% of the original history, you're not going to come up with a full story. You're going to get bits and pieces. So I tend to look at things from more of a symbolic, esoteric, or uh, more of a conceptual perspective. So instead of just seeing like Lucifer as the Greco-Roman male god of Venus, which he was, I also look at the etymology. See the name as more of a concept, just like the name Shiva. Name Shiva. Shiva, no thing. Representation of the void. Different face of it. Still a representation of the void. And you get into things like the black sun. A black sun as well being a representation of the void. And, I hear, I've like seen a lot of debate, related to the idea, well, is Lucifer Shiva, or is Shiva Satan, or what have you, And personally, what I've picked up since I've started working with Shiva is I've picked up very similar energies to what you might call the Luciferian archetype. Of course, Shiva means no thing, so it refers to, pretty just about the entire universe. So you could even say that maybe Lucifer is a mask of Shiva. Luciferians, they kind of see Lucifer as the top guy. They'd say Shiva is a mask of Lucifer. Shivites would say, no, Lucifer is a mask of Shiva. Everything's a mask of Shiva. None of that matters. Because even though I have picked up similar energies from these entities, and I do kind of consider them two different ways of explaining the same concept, except one's from the East and one's from the West. What's really important is the concepts that they represent. So in the East, you didn't have the need for like a adversarial, type of archetype. Because they're pagans there. That they don't have Jehovah there. There's no need to rebel against a controlling religion. Like Christianity or Judaism or Islam. There's none of that. They don't have to worry about that. They've got paganism there still. And their concept of God is more of a pantheistic type of concept of God, where it's like, yes, we believe in Brahma, God, but God is everything. And in that sense, you are God. The chair sitting next to me is God. Shiva is God. Lucifer is God. God can be whatever you conceptualize God to be. Well, in the West, as Christianity developed, obviously they made Lucifer their devil. That's how they describe him. And as Christianity developed, it created a dualistic mindset. So I think that this cosmic left-hand path void type of energy, I think in the West it probably incarnated as like a Luciferic type of figure, with that adversarial tinge to it, because you kind of need that to kind of break the old ways of thinking, in the West. In the East, you don't need that. In the East, you've got Shiva, and he teaches like the more cosmic, ideas of, the universe and things like that. But you don't have like the adversarial nature. Like you don't hear about, it's not like Shiva's trying to overthrow, Brahma or something, The point that I'm making is that, all these entities, instead of looking at them as individual entities or looking at them as like people, they can incarnate as, individuals, but you got to look beyond that. You got to look at what it is they represent, and I think that's why entities like the Black Sun, a lot of times they'll come through as Lucifer, or, I'd say, I've noticed Shiva's energy, is kind of in that void milieu, very much so actually, so I could see Shiva being related to the Black Sun. Another entity like maybe Sorath as well. Definitely Sorath. But as I said, when we're talking about these entities, we have to see the forest, for the trees. We have to look beyond the mask that we have here on this planet to represent these energies. These energies are cosmic, despite what we may understand or what we may have written down in our little history books. These are just small details used to represent something far larger and far more cosmic. So, when I see different people saying that say the black sun is Lucifer, or the black sun is Shiva, or Shiva is Lucifer, or things like that, I'm kind of like, yes and no. As individual incarnations, no, they're not quite the same. They have their own specific energies. But as ideas, as esoteric cosmic ideas, yes, they represent the same types of things, different faces of it. If you work with a black sun, it's obviously going to be far more, I'll even say brutal, than working with Lucifer. And Shiva's, a bit, I don't want to say brutal, but a bit more cosmic and mind-bending, than an entity like Lucifer. Whereas Lucifer, he's more related to things like enlightenment through the ego, reading lots of books, gathering lots of knowledge. Shiva is related more to, enlightenment through, Eastern style enlightenment through finding the self, but also through, really thinking about, the cosmic nature of the universe. And the black sun, well, the black sun is just it's a straight up void. You go in there and you find the grail of Lucifer. You find the holy grail, whatever you want to call it, filled with the golden elixir of life. You find the brightest light inside that darkness. But usually to get to that bright light, you got to go through some, real tough darkness. I've jumped into the void of the black sun a few times through meditation. And it's not easy. It's one of the more difficult entities to work with. I'd say probably the most difficult, in my opinion. But that's beside the point. The point of this video is when you look at entities, don't look at their individual incarnations. Don't worry so much about what men wrote in our history books, because we're just writing down these little details. Look at entities from an esoteric standpoint, from an etymological standpoint, to really understand what they represent as a concept. That's really the best way to understand these entities. And then when you understand the concepts, you realize that the individual masks are just different manifestations of these concepts that pop up depending on where they're needed. That's about all. Cult of the Sun out.